Hey guys, I'm Reed. That's Josh, and welcome to episode 3 of Grace-Filled Parenting. We want to talk today a little bit about fear, as you heard us in episode 2, kind of talking about a debrief from our time in Atlanta together. That was something that kept coming up. Is the dark sides of fear and need, and so we want to start with fear, and our entire context, or the world that we're kind of having this conversation in, is from the Gospel of Luke in the Bible, and it's in chapter 15. And there's the story that Jesus tells of a man who had 2 sons, and we often call it the prodigal son. And so, in that story, we are convinced that the father doesn't react out of fear at any point. And so that's one of like these core things that we're holding on to in this conversation. So, Josh, when we talk about fear, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I think about like trying to not react to our kids through our fear, right? And there's so many different ways we can do this. And I like for me, one of the things that rises is a sense of how to be clear about this and how important it is to be clear about this. Because I think if we're unsure or the terms that we use or seem fuzzy or untrue, then they can be unuseful. They can be less useful, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think is really, really important here is to make sure we say that what we're not promoting is to not be afraid, right? Because I don't think that that's possible. And I think one of the hardest parts about parenting, and I think one of the things I see in this room that is most difficult about parenting with others, is how fearful it is because of how many things there are to be afraid of.
Yeah.
And I think we just got to be honest about that. Like, we have to make sure we understand what we're saying. Like, we're not trying to say that this is an easy thing or this is an obvious thing or anything like that. What we're saying is there is plenty to fear. And I think in this story that Jesus sets up, that the father has plenty to fear, namely, which is one of the things that I fear the most, is his son suffering, right?
Yeah.
And then even further than that his son causing suffering.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, the premise of what we're saying here is that when we see our kid suffering or possibly suffering or causing suffering or possibly causing suffering, I think Luke 15, I think Grace-Filled Parenting calls us to not react out of fear, even though it is instinctual and human and I think pretty normative to do so.
Yeah.
Like working really hard to not let that be our reaction. And honestly, Reed, it's a really, really difficult thing to do. I think it's a worthy thing for us to endeavor towards.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, really hard. And I think about like the difficulties of kind of moving parents towards that thought process. I don't know, it seems daunting at times, right?
Yeah. Seems really daunting. And one of the things that I wrestle with is like, the word fear might not capture it. It might feel more like anxiety, or the word like that. I think that's the word we use a lot right now when we think about parenting and our kids and what our kids are experiencing. And so I'm wrestling with it a little bit, and I have this image in my head of graceful versus grace-filled. And we're talking about grace-filled parenting. We're not talking about graceful parenting. This is not going to be a beautiful ice skating ballet situation where it looks beautiful all the time, but it might look more like Chris Berman, bumbling, stumbling, rumbling, right? We're making our way forward, but it doesn't always look good. There are obstacles, there are things that are happening. It is very challenging, but within those things, I want my face towards this grace-filled orientation. And I want that to be the perspective I take when I'm encountering my child. And when I do react out of fear, because I will, it's not an if, it's a when. Like, when I react out of fear, one of the things that I'm learning is like, it's still impactful later to go back to my child and have a conversation about, hey, look, I react out of fear and I'm sorry that happened. And I want you to know that you don't have to hold space for me. Like that, I'm working on holding space for you. I want to be a better parent for you. And so just that follow-up conversation with my child is a big deal and makes a big impact. And is also weirdly, like, not scary, but like it'd be a little bit like, I don't want to do that. Like, he's screwed up.
Rather not.
Come on, he's the one that screwed up. He should have, like, whatever. It's like, it's just admitting like, hey, look, I overreacted is is a win, I think, sometimes in this process. And one of the fears that I wrestle with too is perception from other people.
Yeah.
And when my child doesn't act well, or doesn't act right, or doesn't act good, um, how do people then perceive me as a parent, or perceive us as a parenting couple, right? As with my wife, like, and what does that mean about our family and all this sort of stuff? And so those stories kind of creep in too, that are a different type of fear, and it all just kind of like commingles in this weird orb of unprocessed fear.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. Like, I don't even want to say that's true of me. And of course it's true of me. Of course it's true of me, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want people to think I'm a bad parent. It matters a great deal.
Yeah.
One of the things that we kind of miss inside our context here, the context of the story that Jesus is telling, is like sort of the cultural things. But
Yeah.
like one of the things we haven't really like dug into a whole lot is that like the son is insulting his father, obviously, by demanding the money and his inheritance now, even though his father's still alive, right? Like basically saying, I wish you were dead so I could have your stuff. And that's pretty messed up. But then like even further, what we really can't see right now in like kind of our culture is that like it's also like it's pretty insulting to like the town, like
Mhm.
community, right? This is
Yeah.
like for like he's talking to people that would understand what it would be like for the father to chop up parts of land and sell it off, right? And
Right.
like so more and more like there's even more context around like Jesus is intentionally putting that in. One of the people that reacted inside of the session on our workshop on Sunday, where we actually got to do one of the graceful parenting workshops, said like kind of was working through this concept and said it's possible that people like would look at what the father did inside of the story and call him a bad parent.
Yeah.
Because usually the criteria that we use for like if a parent is good or not in the world is if their kid is behaving well. Right. Which is, I think what we're saying here, Reed, is a deeply untrue way of evaluating parenting.
Right.
Like it just doesn't, first of all, it's very, very unfair. And B, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, us looking at a kid's behavior and assuming that the problem is with the parents who are trying and loving them. Like doing a really, really, really good job might still not create output that we want in this, right? There's a million variables inside of this. Like I've done really, really good parenting that resulted in like a complete meltdown, right? And I've also just been a total jerk, and my kids reacted really well. Like these are not like connected. So I think us first of all beginning to recognize the fear that we do have culturally of being able to see like my kid being like kind of like me in the world, right? Like how people perceive me in the world. That's a very unhelpful way of
for sure.
of like promoting parenting and like you know being parented and motivating myself towards parenting. But it's something I think we all like have to manage, you know?
Yeah. So the fear that sits and rests on us is heavy and hard, and acting like it's not real is not what we're saying. And instead, if I'll acknowledge my own fear, one of the things that I'll be able to do is to not put it back onto my child. It's not my child's job to hold my fear. And I can cultivate within myself space and place for calm and presence, that my child knows without a doubt that when they come to me, that they belong with me. And so there's this image in the Psalms that I love a lot, where the psalmist talks about like that God took him from a narrow place and brought me to this place of a broad place, a wide place. And the image I love there is so beautiful, is that it's like I'm going from this really constricted feeling of like, if I mess up at all, like I'm going to make somebody mad, or like somebody's going to react really big. And there's this amazing thing that can happen where God can move us to this broad place and then allow us to then create for our children a broad place to exist, where like one little mistake isn't going to cause a huge blow up from me toward them. That I have as an adult cultivated a sense of calm or presence for my child, and I don't have to react out of fear.
Man, I think that's the thing, man. I love that word, cultivate. I can't imagine like how difficult this is for someone to approach this and just being like, well, so like I just have to pretend I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just pretending, though. I do think there are moments where I have to be kind of intentional about how I'm
Hmm.
like thinking through stuff, right? Being slow and thoughtful about what I want to say in moments where I'm really revved up and really upset.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to you earlier, Reed, about this moment where Jonas had learned. He was like 6, I think. He was like in the
Hmm.
first grade, and he learned the word sneaky. And when I came into his bedroom one morning, like at 6:15 in the morning before school, he just was gone. And like I checked downstairs, there was no way, nothing. And like, at minute 2 and 3, you're like telling yourself like, he's all right, just don't freak out. And by minute like 8 and 9, like you're like trying to get the like, who do we call? Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's what we start to like go alarm bells. And he was just like in his closet, like he heard me get up, and he was in his closet, like being sneaky and staying away from me and hiding. And so I found him about like minute 10, and like what like my relief was like incredible, and then immediately turned to like rage, right? Just like fury.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like just thinking about like that, I gotta cultivate something else in those moments,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's moments where like
Hmm.
like the fear is overwhelming, and the only reaction that my body knows is to cover it is anger.
Yeah.
I can't feel like I can't manage all that, and so I have to work really hard, like in moments outside of that moment, to be able to
Yeah.
say like, how am I managing my fear? How am I working through this? How am I not handing all of my fear and my anxiety and my worry and my frustration and my concern and my overwhelm to my kid and have them manage it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how am I not doing that? I think it's really hard.
Yeah. It's so hard. Oh, but a hard thing that's really worthy of doing. And the other thing that I've been telling myself a lot is like, uh, there's that clip that went around, or a meme that went around a bunch. I was like, choose your heart in life. And
Right.
I'm like, it's fine. Yes, on one level, it's true. I also think there's like, maybe like on the other side of kindness is the life that I want.
Yeah.
Like if I can just be a little bit kinder to myself too, like
Mm.
I'm gonna react out of fear sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
But the only way to return is to come back.
Right.
And when that happens, it means that I get to show my child what repair and relationship looks like. And that's pretty cool. Right. And so it doesn't mean that like I've forever gone back into acting out of fear and now I can't get back on the rails, I guess, or something. But like, no, like on the other side of kindness is this remarkable openness to know like love is strong enough to hold space for both of that. For the
Yes.
times where I
Yes.
have cultivated calm for my child and when I haven't, to then circle back and be like, hey bud, look, whoa, I lost it.
Whoa.
Whoa. Dad acted like an absolute fool for a minute there. And I need you to know I'm sorry. Like I did not, my reaction was unwarranted.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And just that on the other side of kindness, I think we can find a life that feels a little bit more like that broad place.
Man, I think that's so good, of being able to like think about how to manage those moments and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
The two places that I go are like be able to recognize that we're talking about parenting here, and we're talking about how the father is trying to show us how we can help our kids feel like they belong to us.
Yeah.
But to begin to cultivate that ability to manage that fear and to not make fear what I react out of.
Yeah.
I think it begins, one of the steps we can start with is beginning to look at and say like, I belong to him, like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Right. Like all of my fear and all of my shame and all my worry and all of my overwhelm like I can hand that to him.
Yeah.
Right. And work it through there. Like I always belonged with him, even in the hardest moments, even in the worst moments. And so, um, again, I think there's a lot of work to do inside of that, but I think that's a place you could begin. Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing would be to like, instead of just having the negative of saying like, okay, I don't want to react out of fear, then I put the positive of like, I do want to react through belonging.
Hmm.
Right. I want to communicate. And I think that's what the father is doing inside of this.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why it's not just like this ideal that we have. It's like there's purpose in it.
Hmm.
Right. Like the idea is that we're not going to react out of fear, and we are going to react out of belonging.
Right.
So what we don't have to say is that all choices are okay, because they are not.
Right.
Right. And we have to be permissive in that. Like we can have guardrails, we can have non-negotiables, we can have things that we feel as though this is something that we really, really believe in. But the flip side is like, none of those things, none of those poor choices, none of the suffering that they could endure or cause would ever
Hmm.
bring the son out of belonging with the father, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And that's a really, really difficult thing to communicate. but if I can do it without fear, I got a shot. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing, is like, how can I cultivate in me a response through belonging and not through fear?
Boom.
It's so hard.
So
We're going to do it with you guys.
yeah. In the next episode, we'll be pushing into need a little bit. We're going to step into what we mean when we talk about need. For now, thanks for listening to episode 3. This week, do your best. And when you do find yourself reacting out of fear, the earlier you become aware of it, the earlier you can then move out of it, and not parent through it, and choose something else and model that for your kid as well. And that's the best teaching you can do, is modeling instead of talking. So thank y'all for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.